Over the past few days, maybe as a matter of coincidence, I've been seeing a lot of things in my algorithm about people bemoaning the American literacy experience and people wanting to read more. I think, of course, that this is overall a good thing. This is a trend that is kind of collecting. Well, there is a kind of moral supremacy arc that might be happening to reading. I happen to live in New York City. New York City is known for being kind of like an urban elite kind of place. And the type of people that are attracted to the academic, well read lifestyle are those who are often genuinely also attracted to high intellectual status. And I think that those two things go together because of just the nature of what it's like to embed oneself in books. But I would also perhaps like to make the argument that reading is less about what you finish and more about the life that you're leading by being a reader. I think about the book that I'm reading right now, How to Talk About Books You Haven't Read by Pierre Bayard, and specifically how his argument generally falls into the category of you will never read all of the books. There is no such thing, right? Most books will never be seen by you, and those that are seen by you will be skimmed, some percentage of them. And then of all of the books you read, they will all be forgotten and turned into memory or turned into some background noise of the life that we lead in our conscious and subconscious minds. Some memories will be more prevalent than others. Some ideas will be more prevalent than others. I'm also reading The Warburgs by Ron Chernow, and it's just reminding me of how many people there were and are. And a lot of people will repeat certain, I don't know, familial, generational trauma is kind of a common phrase that's used these days. But I think it's more of just the milieu of being human. And I think that this is probably one of the reasons that, again, I'm trepidatiously optimistic about the current trend towards people wanting to be better readers. I think that it's possible that this is, again, just a symptomatic moral outrage to dealing with social media and wanting to be morally offline, as opposed to the deeper value of curiosity that can be had by having a reader's life. I'd almost like to invoke the everyman reader, the type of reader who is reading for their own satisfaction without any particular kind of end goal. And I know for somebody who makes a reading app and discusses reading strategies all the time, that feels a little hypocritical. But I think of reading as a system because I enjoy the system of thinking. I enjoy the puzzle that is the human mind and kind of finding different entry points into being able to say something interesting about the books that we read and about the books that were written, about the books that will be written. And, you know, when there's a huge moral argument attached to the kind of idiocracy element of reading, what we end up with is a more judgmental society around books. And then, you know, there's a few options maybe that branch from there. One, people say only certain books will make you an intellectual. And of course, that's already the case. I mean, some books are easier than others. There's a big, you know, culture of books on the internet, book talk. But a lot of the books that are in book talk then form their own kind of walled culture where it's like, oh, we only read these types of very pop fiction, kind of romance, Order of Court of Thorns and Roses type books. And I don't know. I think that to me, it's more important for everybody to come up with their own idiosyncratic system for reading and then maintain that system over their life. And because reading is an active skill, that doesn't mean that there's just periods of time where a person is languishing without reading. I actually think of it more as being washed over by words, where if you take a shower every day, or you drink water every day, or you eat food every day, some of your diet, some of your informational diet should be words from books. And I don't think that these needs to be books that you need to finish as much as I used to think that. I think I used to believe that it was kind of a all or nothing kind of like binary, but now I see it as a spectrum. And I think for ideas that you deem important and that are really important to you in terms of your curiosity and your appreciation and understanding of your life and your community and what you value, you should go out of your way to make better notes for those books. You should go out of your way to build a commonplace book around those books, to come up with quizzes to test yourself on, so that your brain can really structuralize some of these ideas. But for other books, it's okay to kind of let them go. Not all books need to be read the same. And I fear that, again, trepidatiously optimistic trend of people being really into reading again opens the floodgates to moralizing a very certain type of reading over another type of reading. This is, again, a tricky subject because we are doing a lot of fragmentary reading on the internet. There was a piece posted on The Atlantic about this that I'm mainly referencing because it caught a lot of steam, and then I saw a post on Hacker News, and obviously my algorithm might also be targeted a little bit more towards readers because I talk about reading a lot. But I find that there is a cultural, when I talk to people about this, they're like, yeah, that is important. Yeah. And I'm like, so what are we going to do about it? And they're like, I don't know. You know, right? So there's the follow-up, I think, with reading is really important. Decreasing the 0 to 1 effect of becoming a reader, as it were, to make it easy enough to collect a library that a person can be proud of and build a personal library that they can then share with their network. So this reading journal wasn't really a conversation about what I'm reading. I guess if I had to maybe do a sentence for each. Why Does the World Exist by Jim Holt. Going through Schopenhauer's philosophy of the universe and Spinoza's philosophy of the universe. He was also discussing kind of the idea of co-creating the universe, where it's like, are humans co-creating the universe? Is God a participle in everybody, which is a very Spinoza thought. I read a book last year, How to Think About Death, or Think Least About Death, on Spinoza, and it was talking about conatus, which was an idea that I really meditated on for a while, which is finding something's true nature and then living by that true nature. Barbarians at the Gate. Kravis just made a huge bid, the $90 bid. They're talking with Shearson. Shearson doesn't want to work with Kravis. They want to work with this guy named, I keep forgetting his name, Kosterman. This is actually a point that funnily enough, I like went to like think about these bankers like Forstman, and I'm like, I can't remember any of their names. And I think that's kind of the point, is that there's a bunch of spun up investment banks that are just making these huge deals on Wall Street with these leverage buyouts or these big trades, or kind of like not insider trading, but like, you know, making these big investment plays, and we never know who they are. So I think that that's perhaps a symptom of an economy that is run by debt. And The Warburgers by Ron Chernow. Again, this is like one of those things that I'm enjoying in audiobook format. It is a really good going for a walk book, but it's also kind of hard to follow because there's just so many names and so many generations of names to follow. I really like the story of A.B. Warburg, where he went to the American South to hang out with Native Americans because he was really interested in art history. He's the oldest son, I think, of Moritz, and he wanted to basically, go into art history, and they run a banking family, so they're like, we can't have you do that. And he married outside of the Jewish faith. He married an American woman. So he's kind of like, him and this other guy, Jim Loeb, are doing a bunch of stuff, so that's pretty interesting. Inventor of the Future, Buckminster Fuller. So actually a connection between Why Does the World Exist and the Inventor of the Future book is that in Schopenhauer's life, he he was very inspired by the Upanishads and Buddhist culture, and he basically described the universe as a force of will where the will is suffering. So basically the entire universe is a force of suffering. And, it's a very Buddhist thought about like the kind of dharmic cycle, how we're all kind of moving through the same pain circle. And, but Jim Holt points out that this is ironic and hypocritical because the way that he lived his life was very kind of sensual, and he had a bunch of, he loved eating good food, and he got into an argument with someone in his flat, and he like pushed her down the stairs, so he had to give her money for the rest of her life. And that ties to Buckminster Fuller, because Buckminster Fuller, who again has this kind of mythologized kind of like life, was 36, and then he had an affair with this 17-year-old, 18-year-old girl, and then when she turned down his marriage proposal, he like stalked her for a while in Brooklyn. And I think that that's an important thing about history, is that sometimes in the Western canon, you'll have people like Schopenhauer or Buckminster Fuller, and history will necessarily whitewash their achievements and sins down to their name, and people will just become a name, which is a representation of the things that they did, for better or for worse, which isn't the case, because they were people and they had good sides and they had bad sides. We just talked about in the last video about how Buckminster tried to take his own life because he wanted to give his life insurance to his family so that they could live healthier, even though his wife, it sounds like, was already pretty rich, and that his mother was also pretty wealthy. And then with Schopenhauer, again, he's such a mainstay in the American kind of mindset of philosophy, and the kind of, people will throw him up there with people like Nietzsche and stuff like that in terms of thinking about philosophers, or Heidegger. And these people were all people. They all were flawed, and even though their last names, and maybe this ties back into the initial point that I was making, become an intellectual kind of bragging point. People are like, oh yeah, I've read Heidegger, or oh yeah, I've read blah, blah, blah. And it becomes more about the bragging and the positioning, the social positioning, the social signaling, than it is about the knowledge that these people have to offer the living. So I guess in conclusion, I'm trepidatiously optimistic about all of the reading content that I've been seeing. I hope it doesn't spin out into a moral kind of panic. I want people to adopt heavier reading strategies into their life in a way that is rational, that works for them, that's idiosyncratic, but then also does push them. I don't believe in a system where readers are just reading books and they're not engaging with them at the level of challenging oneself. I think it's important, the same way that when you're exercising, you exercise multiple parts of your body, but I also don't think that it's a necessity that we all do the exact same exercise, if that makes sense. If reading is akin to a calisthenics of the mind, we all need to find our own version of calisthenics. Have a good one.